The MG. Red lights go on then for 20 minutes of racing for the Armed Forces Race Challenge. Lights go out, race gets underway then, and they head off up towards Redgate Corner. Mark White not the fastest away, it's the Seat Ibiza, the blue car, that's got the lead as they come into the first corner. There's one with its bonnets having flipped up. That's Paul Waterhouse, number 230, towards the back of the field, or to the back now as he pulls off. Oh, and the Ibiza has had a big moment and collected the Fiesta. Was that Flint's car possibly? As they were headed through Redgate and Hollywood. I think everyone's continued, but a bit of a messy first corner or so. That it's. Ooh. Another moment, and that's Mike Nash, isn't it, that's having a big off. He's off into the tyre barriers at the Craner curves, I'm afraid. Didn't see quite how that started. He's off into the wall, so I suspect we might see an interruption. We can't have the safety car used, by the way, in the Armed Forces Race Challenge, but for the moment at least the race continues, and they're heading through the old hairpin for the first time in very difficult conditions. Meanwhile, Paul Waterhouse is reversing down the pit lane with his bonnet in front of his windscreen at the moment. So clearly all not fixed down well before his race got underway. And red lights now on and the race being stopped, to no one's great surprise.
We did see Pete Dillnock's Porsche, so he did get out into the race, maybe from the back of the grid, maybe decided starting your Porsche at the front of a standing. So White Nosh has got away. So the car that was in the barriers, that presumably is the reason for the red flag, has continued. Hopefully, he's not leaking fluid all down on the Craner curves on what already was a wet circuit. Because
red lights go on and they go out. The race gets underway then. Who makes the best start this time? I think Mark White makes a slightly better start than he did first time around, and he's got his nose in front as they head up into Redgate Corner for the first time. But it's John Donnelly who again is not shoddy away. He's still there in second place. It's James Flint in third in the Fiesta as they turn their way through Redgate Corner. Let's hope for a little bit more order through the Craner curves this time than we had a lap ago, and they are making their way out of Hollywood, and it is White that's leading, Chalky White leading, John Donnelly second, James Flint third, and it's Jonathan Candler in his MG in fourth place.
Yes, that's right. Good start there from that BMW that's made good progress from a bit further back as well. We'll look out for the Porsche of Peter Dillnock. He'll be looking to gain positions, you'd think. And there's the Renault Clio of Ben McLaughlin, and he's about to go past the Daewoo of Ian Cooper.
Yeah, it certainly is. As they make their way up through McLean's, there's the 16 car, Trevor Hancock's Honda Civic, heading off up towards Coppice for the first time. Now, 1 and 2 drivers, and that's Chris Pawley possibly without his lights on. You might be advised to turn your lights on in these conditions, both for front and rear visibility, because there's a lot of spray out there, and drivers will be reliant, I would think, on headlights to see cars coming up in their mirrors, which there'll be quite a bit of during the course of this Armed Forces Race Challenge event.
I think Trevor Hancock just gained a position on Matthew Beach's fast start in BMW. Not sure we've seen Trevor in the Honda before.
I don't think we have.
He's raced Peugeot, I think, in the past. So Mark White's going away up front, 3 seconds clear of John Cobley's Seat. James Flint is third in the Fiesta, Jonathan Candler fourth in the MG, so as they started. But Pete Dillnock, who went from the pit lane, had a spin at Coppice, you can see on the inset at the bottom right of your screen, but he's continued. There's a car that through the gravel I can hear. I think it's Jonathan Candler from fourth position. I can see out of the window of the booth here. So Jonathan Candler from fourth and second in class. There he is, just rejoining in the ZR, tracking right through the gravel, and he's lost several positions because of that.
An uncharacteristic mistake from someone who's a 3-time champion. It is usually so consistent, but that's the kind of thing that can make you a bit less consistent. That Clio got a little bit close to the side of the number 64 car there, didn't it, Harry Townsend? But all was well that ended well. That's Ben McLaughlin in his Clio. I had a feeling it was off this morning as well. There's Dupes, Ian Cooper, the driver from Liverpool, an aircraft engineer, in the budget racing Daewoo, which is more Astra underneath really, and of course it's the Astra Mark II shell that is the familiar shape of that car from the 90s, I guess, the Daewoo. It's that Adam Dewis, I think, in his 1 Series BMW that's in strife. We saw him pull into the pits, didn't we, at the red flag, Josh, so he's clearly got some problems with that car today.
Yes, it's not running well. That Peugeot a bit smoky, it's hard to tell if it's spray or smoke. Look quite as clear as the others. So Mark White's gone through in a 1:30.8. It's not quite as quick as he went in qualifying. He's 6 seconds now ahead of John Cobley. Trevor Hancock's up to 4th in the Civic. We saw him making progress. He's made even further progression through the field, but might not get any further because there's a big gap of James Flint ahead. Meanwhile, there's, I think, Paul Chapman in the Renault Clio, the Army Motorsport car, and understeering behind him the BMW of Matthew Beach. So that's about a 6th and 7th position in this race. And that's allowed the Clio of Paul Chapman to get away heading down the Craner curve for the 3rd time of asking in this race. Look a bit further back. Is that Richard Brown's MR2 you told us about?
Yeah.
There's about a second on the circuit because the much less powerful Ford Fiesta ST of James Flint has caught John Cobley.
Yes, he has. John Cobley being caught there as they head up towards Coppice on lap 3 of this race. There was 1.5 seconds between these two at the start of the lap, but it's quite a bit less than that now. Mark White is 6 seconds plus into the distance, though, as they head down the back straight towards the Roberts chicane. At this part of the circuit, you can see the slightly more powerful car able to get away, but through the twistier bits, then that power is not what John Cobley really needs at this stage, is it? And it allows James Flint in the Fiesta to close the gap a little bit in the RAF liveried ST. They've got quite a decent advantage over Trevor Hancock in 4th place in the Honda Civic, and then in 5th spot I think it's still Chris Pawley in the Clio, but Cobley's got a bit of work to do here to keep Flint at bay, although the gap has gone out again over the last 3/4 of a lap.
Both of these cars are slower than Paul Chapman in 6th, so Paul Chapman, 2nd quickest driver on the circuit. The Peugeot is going off the road. That's of James Hancock. I think that's the car that Trevor's raced in the past. But James has got the car stopped in the runoff and will be able to rejoin when he finds a clear spot in the traffic, which now is it just behind Mark Oliver, who went a bit deep. The scaffolder from Leeds went a bit deep into the corner. Here's about a 7th, and Jonathan Cadender recovering after that off. He's looking to the outside of Matthew Beach in that 3 Series. I'm not sure how much he can see because that's pretty steamed up inside.
There's a sort of letterbox, isn't there? Oh, and he's gone off. It's not the... what you can see, it's the problem. It's how much grip he's got that's the problem, because the car suddenly slaps around Matthew Beach. Fortunately, avoided by the following Jonathan Candler. He's off onto the grass on the exit of the Old Hairpin. He's going to get back into the race, but not before he's lost a few positions.
Yes, so again, proof of how tricky it is out there. Driver in 7th place rotates, but will rejoin, thankfully. And oh, now there's another one off, just at the next corner. One of the Clios is at 88, Simon Skirton, who has gone for a rotation.
Yeah, it is. So he's gone off, Simon Skirton, the driver from Nottingham, local driver.
Is that another driver in a new car, I think?
Yeah.
So Richard Brown's got the MR2 up into the top 10, which is a good effort for the retired Army officer. But he's not far ahead of Luke Arpino, the Class D leader, in his Mazda MX-5. And it sounds like more tyres screw down there at the chicane.
Yeah, Arpino's in 11th place overall, isn't he, at the moment? The top 3 overall are all respectively leading their classes. Mark White, Class B, John Cobley, Class A, and Flint in Class C. Another moment there at the chicane, though. Another 2 moments there at the chicane.
Yeah, before that, Ben McLaughlin had been off the road in 96, and then the next 2 are now 9th and 10th, in fact, because of the off Beach. Brown and Arpino, as you mentioned, both sideways. They're under threat, though, from 64. Harry Townsend's Peugeot 306 has made good progress throughout this race. Around the outside, he dares to go. And Arpino might lose out here, so into the top 10 for Harry Townsend.
4.5 minutes of this race left. To remind you, it was a 12-minute race, the restart, after the early red flag with the tyre barriers damaged, but Mike Nash went off. Here's, though, a battle between 64 and 22. That's Luke Arpino as he tries to recover from that moment. The 64 car is the Harry Townsend Peugeot 306 GTI.
And they're both being caught, I think, by Ian Cooper in the Daewoo. So it's several cars involved in that battle. There's a Mini in there behind as well. That's the car driven by George Harvey. So it's at 5 cars in that battle, heading out of McLean's up towards Coppice, not that far ahead of another Mazda MX-5. That's the car of Gareth Moss in 26, the marine engineer from Staffordshire. So he's up next in what is 14th position rather, and trying to close in on this group of cars, being led in 9th position by Richard Brown, the retired army officer.
He's down to Roberts chicane once again. This is to complete his 5th lap of the race. That's already been done by Mark White, who now leads by 12.5 seconds from John Cobley and James Flint, who are separated by less than 1 second. 15 car there we could see was that of George Harvey in the Mini Cooper S at the rear of that group, but now it's Harry Townsend putting some pressure on Richard Brown for 9th position, Luke Arpino 10th, in Cooper 11th, and then it's going to be 11th and 12th, and then it's the George Harvey car with an obvious cross in the back 13th as the field heads now down the Craner curves.
Arpino loses another spot as Ian Cooper moves ahead up into 11th position. He did a personal best lap last time at 1 minute 41, down into the old hairpin. And the second place car is slowing down the exhibition straight. John Cobley's Seat Ibiza, I'm afraid, may not make it to the end. Doesn't
look like it's going to, does it? It's got the hazards on, and the rain light is flashing as well. That will warn drivers of a problem, a car going slowly. So that promotes Trevor Hancock up inside the top 3. It means that James Flint is now very comfortable in 2nd position, and Christopher Pawley, who we can see on screen there, is up to 4th. But he's got Paul Chapman in the slightly more modern Clio right behind him now, the number 78 car with the Army Motorsport livery, the sort of camo livery on the side of the car. So Paul Chapman, who was going very quickly early on in the race, he's now up to 5th.
He was a second and a half quicker than Pawley last time round.
Okay, so let's see if he's able to do anything about it and make a position up. 6th now is Jonathan Candler as he recovers from his earlier off at Redgate and Hollywood.
We did just see on the inset John Cobley maybe not moving very quickly into the chicane, and still on the circuit, so hopefully he's moved on from there. So this battle is now for 8th position that Richard Brown heads. And Luke Arpino's losing more positions here, isn't he? He's still leading Class D, but he's fallen to the back of the group now behind Gareth Moss.
Yeah, I wonder if Fall is not quite well with that car, or maybe he's not particularly enjoying these conditions.
He's lapping near to his best, so he's only half a second off last time. So it might just be the pace of a Class D car that was higher up than where it really should have been at that point.
He's still crucially ahead of Peter McNichol, who's 2nd within that class.
And was lapping a couple of seconds quicker also.
And that's him just going through shot there, wasn't it, in the red MX-5 just behind Paul Waterhouse's Peugeot. Here's the race leader though, Mark White, who's now on to his last lap of the race because there's less than a minute of it to go. So 65 Chalky White, who's won so many of these Armed Forces races over the last decade or so, picking his way through some of the traffic as well now. Very experienced driver, of course, and he's built up this lead of nearly 20 seconds. It probably will be more than 20 seconds by the end of it.
He's developed his car over the last 7 seasons, runs the K24 2.4 litre engine now, and he's lapped everybody up to Luke Arpino, hasn't he? So that's about half the field he has been able to lap, such as his pace, in just a 12-minute race rather than the advertised 20. So he really has dominated this in a Class B car. The Honda Civic Type R, meanwhile, just ahead of them, a change because Harry Townsend has moved up into 8th ahead of Richard Brown. They're going to get another lap because Mark White's just behind them.
Yeah, they will have one more lap to resolve that, but White, we could just see heading into the chicane. He'll be out of the chicane now. The clock has counted down to 0, so it will be Mark White that has taken the checkered flag to win the Armed Forces Race Challenge then. He's just lapping on his slowing down lap, if you like, the Luke Arpino car, who should really just keep going and doing the rest of the race.
Arpino is showing us with a checker on our screen.
Okay, so maybe it was already lapped as they went over the line.
James Flint's on for his best result, isn't he? And I think it's probably his first class win on an overall result. Here he comes.
Yeah, over the line he goes to take 2nd place then, so number 935. James Flint, the driver from Clumpton in Devon. He takes the Class C victory here. And Trevor Hancock in the Honda, he takes a Class B 2nd place and 3rd place overall. Of course, with the demise of John Cobley, I think it's going to be Andy Holmes in the MGB that's going to win Class A in the end.
Yes, although down in 25th overall. But tricky stuff out there. Chris Pawley, he came 4th ahead of Paul Chapman, so he stayed ahead to be the better Renault in the race. So there's plenty of people getting best results, I'd suggest, in that top 5.
Yes.
Mark White, we said one before, but the rest of them possibly have got their best overall result out of this race.
Yeah, I'm sure there'll be drivers that are pretty happy with that. Probably some of them just happy just to have survived that. There's John Candler, the 3-time Armed Forces Race Challenge champion in the green and grey and black MGZR. He's completed the top 6. 4th in Class C on that occasion, which is further down than we usually find him. We had that moment earlier on.
The battle for 8th are going either side of the MG that wins Class A, Andy Holmes, and Ian Cooper takes it on the line. He takes 8th position, which I'm sure is the best result for the day, Woo.
Yeah, very good result for Ian Cooper. Dupes is known there, so he's 8th. Harry Townsend 9th. George Harvey completing the top 10. Ben McLaughlin, by the way, was 7th in his Clio. And so the leader or the winner already heading down pit lane. So let's have a look at the result. Mark White, number 65 it is, that won the 8-lap race in his Honda Civic Type R. He was 24.8 seconds clear of number 935 James Flint in 2nd place in the Ford Fiesta ST. 3rd was number 16 Trevor Hancock in the Honda Civic. Then 4th was 888 Chris Pawley. 5th was 78 Paul Chapman. 6th was number 1 Jonathan Candler. 7th was 96 Ben McLaughlin. Ian Cooper was 8th in number 51 ahead of Harry Townsend, number 64 in 9th place. George Harvey, who completed the Class B podium in the Mini, he was 10th in number 15 ahead of Gareth Moss and Richard Brown. Luke Arpino, a lap down, was the Class D winner in 13th position overall ahead of Matthew Beach. And on the following screen, that's where we'll find our Class A victor, who was Andy Holmes, who was in 25th position overall, with John Cobley being a retirement from that race. The Armed Forces Race Challenge is back out again later when they're after the hot hatch, before the hot hatches. This time they're going to be our final race of the day at 6 o'clock, or possibly a little bit after that. We have hot hatch coming up next for you in a few moments time, just as soon as the circuit's clear, and then after that the Calm All Porsche Trophy, the 40-minute race before we return to sprint race action for the rest of the day here at Donington Park at this 750 Motor Club race meeting. And a reminder that here at Donington Park next weekend it's the opening meeting of the season for the British Touring Car Championship, so do head to the Donington Park website to get your tickets ready for that event next weekend. Well, we've got the leading drivers heading down pit lane. Andy McEwen is doing his best to gather them all in. I'm sure we'll hear from him very shortly down in the pit lane. I think he's probably going to try and get class winners if he possibly can, rather than the overall top 3. That's who he'll be looking for, and difficult to find them with so many cars in different classes heading their way down the pit lane. Very shortly we'll be heading down there to Andy. We've got a big grid of hot hatches coming up next, which we're looking forward to for their 15-minute race, first of 2 15-minute races that they will have today. Another multi-class power to weight ratio based category. Just going past my commentary box window at the moment is the number 34 car. That's being pushed backwards by the marshals, Sean Graham's Sultan Low Cost, which I think was also in action at Silverstone over the weekend as well, if I remember rightly. But that clearly had some dramas, and it did get to the checkered flag though, so it must have stopped just after the checkered flag. Sean Graham, he was a lap down. But let's head down to the pit lane now. Andy McEwen is going to speak to our successful drivers in the Armed Forces Race Challenge.
Welcome back to the pit lane, where for once we are about to conduct some interviews and it's not absolutely pelting it down with rain. The weather, dare I say it, brightening up a touch as we move towards the afternoon's action. We're going to kick off our interviews with our overall race winner, Class B winner as well, Mark White. That was, well, a pretty dominant display, I suppose. It's easy for us bystanders to say that looked like quite an easy race. In those conditions, though, I'm sure it wasn't.
No, it was a bit sketchy, but the idea was just to be, as smooth as snake. Once I pulled a bit of a lead, I could relax a little bit and just concentrate on where to brake, where to turn in, just cover off the basics. Seemed to go all right. A couple of hairy moments, but overall, really pleased with the result.
In a championship where consistency is obviously so important, how difficult is it to be consistent where the conditions are like that? They were, I suppose, stable, but challenging.
Yeah, the issue is when you come across a yellow flag, because you have to, and the sensible thing to do is to back off the pace a little bit, which it does affect your consistency. There's no allowance for that, but ultimately you have to be safe. But you know what, everyone drove really nicely, didn't get caught up too badly, people were nice and respectful, and it was just a nice easy win, to be fair.
Car running well?
Car's running really well, thank you. Yeah, it's always pretty good. Generally just put some fuel in it, kick the tyres, and she's good.
It's a racing driver's dream. Mark, congratulations on the class and overall race win. Now, next we have Luke Arpino. Luke was our Class D winner. Luke, well done. Solid race for you. I just spoke to Mark. He said that was pretty easy, but for you guys kind of stuck battling in the midfield, it's a bit busier.
Yeah, that was crazy. The race start, I was just like, couldn't work out whether to push or just survive the first few laps, and yeah, that was the craziest thing I've ever done in a car. Like, it was mad. I
was stood in the pit lane watching that restart as you all piled off into Redgate, big ball of spray. How far ahead can you actually see at that point?
Literally, you could barely see the rain lights in the car ahead, about like 20 feet in front of you. And I've taken all the dehumidifier out of this, the demister, so it fogged up, as you can see, during the event. So I got blinder and blinder, but yeah, no, it's epic. It's such fun.
Didn't stop you going on to win the class, though. Thoughts now to this afternoon? Same result possible, do you think?
Hopefully, yeah. I struggled to get past the Peugeot, but once got past that, it was just put my head down and keep going. So, yeah, hopefully same again. Fingers crossed.
Good stuff. Well done, Luke. Congratulations. Good luck for race 2 later on. Next, James Flint. James was our Class C winner in the little Ford Fiesta. I'll tell you what, that was a bit of a giant killing performance. You were snapping at the heels of some much more powerful machinery.
Yeah, the car handled great. Just a big shout out to Aaron, my mechanic, and my dad for setting it up, really. Right. That's it. That's the reason it was faster, so happy with that.
Are you a driver who naturally seems quite comfortable in the wet?
Yeah, I've always been, even when I was racing as a kid, I seem to excel in the rain. Not sure why, but I think it levels the playing field a bit more power-wise, and it comes down to handling more than anything, so yeah.
And that's where the setup is so key. It's difficult though, isn't it, sometimes when setting the car up to gauge exactly how wet it will be. Your guys obviously got it right.
Yeah, exactly. We did a test day and it was dry, so we just had a bit of a guess really for the start, but it's worked out well, so.
Excellent. Congratulations then, our Class C winner, James Flint, and Andrew Holmes. Thank you, Andrew, for waiting patiently at the end here. Class A winner in one of the older cars on the grid, I think it's fair to say, and that car, I'd imagine, was a handful out there.
Very much a handful, especially as the ventilation for the screen, as you can see at the moment. I couldn't see a thing. So, to be honest, I didn't push it too hard. I just held back a bit, gave myself some room so I could see something. But yeah, these conditions and this, it's got like nearly 300. I'm having to run dries because I haven't got any wets.
Oh, really?
And to be honest, I think I've won the class through attrition of everybody else rather than anything. So, but technically it's the first win I've had. So, in first class win anyway. So, got to be happy with that, I suppose.
I'd say so. Well, congratulations. Well done on the class win.